Okay, so I would be reading the red readout value, and this is the number that I'm looking for right here, is this red value. This is the red channel, the green channel, the blue channel, and then the luminosity of the whole overall image. That's what these numbers up here at the top are, and I'm in Capture One doing all of this. So the trick to it is you can still use the card, even though the card is in shadow, and even though the card is not being perfectly exposed, you can still use the card to color balance, because these gray patches that are right here, they're darker than they should be because the image is underexposed, but they still should be neutral gray. Right? So typically in my case, I've told you before, I would never use the whitest of the patches to actually do a color balancing. The reason you don't want to do that is that you need room to do the color balancing, and if the card is actually exposed correctly, those white values are getting so close to that 250 to 255 range. I mean, they're up there. Hopefully they're in the between the 245 and the 250, they're there. But if there needs to be if there's a serious color cast and there needs to be a pretty serious color correction, it's too close to the end of the curve to actually be able to do it. So you try to do these closer. You want it to be more in the lighter of the midtones. That's where I do it. So that's why I always say I pick the one that's right next to the red, the gray tone that's right next to the red. So, but in this case, because these are darker, you can actually pick one like this guy right here. And if I hover over it, you can see it's already been color balanced. I'm at a 134, 133, 134. So I already know this thing. I'm going to click on it again, but you'll just see it is still neutral. But at any rate, so color balancing has to happen first. And then again, you would come in and you would read this highlight. And I'm getting a 226. That's threshold. The range that I'm looking for that R value should be where? What is my range? 225 to 245. So 225 in that R value, a lot of people would claim that indicates a pretty normal exposure. A 235 in that would actually be something that a lot of fashion and beauty people will do. They're really trying to push those skin tones to brighten them up a little bit. They're hitting it harder. There's no question about that. 245 would be the threshold limit. That you're really taking it. This is now becoming fine art editorial. You've really pushed the skin tones in a serious way. I'm going to show you guys. There's an image of Jimmy in this whatever where it's actually pushed slightly too far. So does that make sense? What's going on in all this? So when I look at this image right here and I'm trying to judge whether I feel like it's exposed correctly, I can't really go off the values here, but I can go off the values here. And my estimation in this was because it fell in that 226 range, or that what I'm reading here is a 226, it indicates to me that the exposure on the subject is actually fine. However, when I look in the background out here, there's nothing about this that is fine. What is white in Photoshop or digitally? Capture One, all of these. What is white? 255. What am I reading here for my luminosity value? 223. Is that white? No. Over on this side over here, same deal, right? The gray is kind of an even. It's a given one for everybody. It's really hard to get the gray wrong because it can pretty much be anything. Again, I come up here to check this guy up here. I'm getting a little more nervous about this right here, and you can see I've dropped down to a 223. In part, the reason this is down a little bit, because I don't think the main light has changed at all, and I don't think the exposure has changed. So you can check that by looking down here at the very bottom. This is at 125th of a second at f22. This is actually the very same thing. So the main light has probably not changed at all in this. How come this is not, well, this is actually 225 right now. So I've gotten very close. So it maybe had come off a little bit. Why would you think that these two exposures were slightly different? Would you think that? Does one seem lighter and one seem darker to you? Doesn't this one on the top seem a little bit lighter? Why would it be that way? Absolutely. Even though that light on the white background is behind her, that is being bounced off ceilings, off of flats, off of columns, off of the floor, off of people's clothes, off the computer screens, off of any V-flats that are up. All of that is actually pumping some light back into her slightly. It's very slight, but nonetheless. So at any rate, this, as it turned out, I thought was a fine exposure on this part. Fine. Next one down. And again, when I'm looking at this, whatever, again, I'll check this part out right here. Double click on this, come in, looking for a series highlight. This again has dropped down now even more because again, we've now removed all the light from the background, which has dropped the light on her. So now, in addition to, even though this team got actually extremely close to getting a black background, they didn't reset, they didn't recheck for their subject exposure, and this is slightly underexposed now. So at any rate, when I look at I'm reading the outside edges right here, and I'm getting a bunch of ones around here. In my experience, just because of the way digital works, there is little likelihood that you will ever actually get to 0. It's really hard to get to 0. However, that 1 to 5 range is not that difficult to get to. The 5 range, anybody who got down to a 5, that's fine. The problem is that in theory, black should never be black. There will always be some energy there at some point. It just keeps getting less and less and less and less, and it's just whether it's detectable or not. Also, noise begins to play a role in all of this because what it's now reading is not exposure, it's reading noise. So just so that you guys know, the 255 white is a legitimate goal. The 0 black is a little bit of it's a little too much. However, there were other teams that got blacks down they were down in the 30s and the 20s and that kind of stuff. There's clearly more work that needed to be done for those, the teams that actually did that part. So I'm going to look at this one, Elizabeth, right now. Now this one, in a weird way, it's not perfect in terms of the orientation of the card, but it's pretty close. I would trust this value. I would trust reading off of this card because the camera, again, the light is to the side. There's no question about that. But the camera is relatively straight on. This side of her is relatively straight on. The card is angled relatively straight on. So again, if I color balance this and actually take a reading off of this, you can see I'm reading a 248 or a 246 in the luminosity part. That indicates to me that this is a correct exposure. Again, I would come in on this part of her face right here and look at this highlight right here. This is a 244. So what is that telling me? Say what? Is it? It is right on the line. So what you see DigitalTech's doing all the time, and I do the same thing, is they're constantly bouncing between skin and card, and they're trying to get that sort of value judgment part in there. The fact that this was not a perfect, that the camera wasn't completely oriented around to where the camera was, and the card pulled into that as well, and it's reading at a 248, and her skin is up at a 244, that's telling me that I maybe am pushing this a little bit too hard. Does that sort of make sense? It wouldn't be an impossibility. I would do other checks on this that we're going to talk about because tonight's all about getting into Capture One. There are other checks that I would do on this just to see what was out, what other things were happening. But to be perfectly honest with you, if there's nothing else, I mean, the other thing I would worry about is actually her sweater right here. And you can see in her sweater, and this is something that we have talked about a little bit in this class, but I want to bring it up again. So in this case, the card is reading a 248, which is indicating that that's okay. Her highlight on her forehead is actually reading in that it was in a 244. That's telling me it's okay, but where I've got a real problem is right in here, and I'm getting a 254 reading in here. This is lost all detail. So in this case, remember we talked about that, and a lot of times there are things in an image that are actually lighter in tone than the white patch on that card. Again, things just like this sort of like sweatshirt kind of thing that's actually a little bit closer to a light falls into that category. So at this stage of the game, I would no longer use the card to base my exposure on it. I would actually use her t-shirt or her sweatshirt. Does that sort of make sense? That becomes the thing that I then need to get in that 245 to 250 range. Right now it's at a 254. It's too blown out. There's no detail in it. Could I probably get it recovered in highlight recovery? Maybe, but that's, again, software fixes are not how you want to work with this. Okay. This is another one of those cases you can see this was actually going to be the darker version of this, and you can spot it. You can not only see tone in that, you can see vignetting in this whole part. The edges around here were in the the high teens, low 20s, but right around here in this part, I'm actually up almost at a 40 here, so not quite black. This became interesting as well, and I see if I have an uncorrected. Yeah, I have an uncorrected color copy of this. This team didn't have a color card in their image, which caused problems. Primarily not trying to determine exposure, because again, I could use skin tone to fudge it a little bit, for lack of a better way of putting it. But the problem I've got here is that this is not color balanced. Can I color balance this thing? Say what? Probably not, because I'm guessing this is completely burned out, and this is what I was saying before. We'll see. We'll try right now. But you remember I said the problem in actually trying to color balance when things are getting really up close to white is there's very little wiggle room to change anything up there. So you can see in that 253, 252, 253 area, whatever, I've only got 2 points on the high end that I can use to actually try and do color correction here. Besides, it already indicates that this thing is color balanced, because there's only a single point of green that's actually out of this. I can click on it, and actually it does color correct it, which is pretty remarkable. Was there anything else I could have actually done to color balance this? Anything else in this? It should be a neutral gray. Wouldn't you guess that that shirt is probably a neutral gray shirt? It's black, but I'm guessing neutral does the same thing. What's interesting is that I actually like the way it worked in the highlight better. It had a little less yellow in it. But at any rate, this was another example. These guys actually got reasonably close. Again, mid-teens for this black in here. Again, this part I wasn't really too concerned about. It seemed a little hot to me, so I would, again, come in and check this part right here. Is this image a little too hot or not, or can you tell? How do you know it's a little hot? Exactly. My red channel in here is hitting at a 252. So is this sort of beginning to make sense to you guys? You see, again, it's this constant back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So I just wanted to show that part. This. So again, in this case, hard to say. The light looks a little bit low to me. You can see that it's really glaring badly on this side. Not so much on this side. I am going to do, again, a check right here. But again, camera is not really exactly on that axis. I'm reading a 247 in my luminosity on the white patch. However, when you start to look at Jimmy's face up in here, you can see that I've already hit up into 250 in the reds, and that's telling me that this image is slightly blown out. I'm guessing by about a third of a stop. Are we good on this part? Are there any questions about this? Okay. Oh, do me a favor really quick. I need everybody to get onto our server. There's a whole big folder that I need you to download. And hopefully they've gotten all this mess with the server here at the Digital Lab worked out. So if you go get onto our server, again, is anybody here on their own laptop that they want to do this with? Okay, so if you're on your own laptop, go to the Finder, go to the Go menu, this thing right up here, go down to the very bottom to Connect to Server, and I am going to zoom. Who knows the keyboard shortcut for zooming in? Is it what? Command plus? Oh, there's a keyboard shortcut. It's Command Option plus to do it on this part. So you need to type this in exactly. The server address that you want to type in is lowercase AFP://172.20.208.221. And then before you connect, before you say anything else, hit this little plus button right over here, because this little plus button will copy this address down into your favorites, and this will stay no matter where you are. And so next week, we're going to be right back in this very same room. When you come in next week and you need to connect to the server, all you need to do is click on this, and it will load it for you. And then once you get that loaded in, hit connect button right down here. And it should get you to, again, the window that says class projects, or it's whatever the server intro is. And then you simply want to click on class projects. Did that work for you guys? Okay, and for everyone else, if you're on the computer screens here, if you're doing working with the classroom computers, you simply want to go to the little cube at the very bottom in the dock. There's a little white cube with a blue apple on it. Click on that. That will also take you to the class partition again. Then you want to go to Engelhard. When you get to Engelhard, class projects, let me get rid of this. Engelhard, in there is a folder called Capture One Working Files. It's this guy right here. I need you to copy that entire folder. Copy it to your desktop. If you've got a hard drive here or your own computer, great, keep it. We're going to be working with this very same folder for the next few weeks. We will also work with it at the very end of the semester. If you didn't bring anything today, don't worry about it. Just copy this to your desktop right now. It'll be there next week, and you can grab a more permanent copy of it next week. It's just an easier thing for us to all be working sort of in the same files. Are we good on this part? Okay. So here's the deal right here, guys. This is in large measure a big part of what this class is about. But I'm going to tell you right now that, so we're getting into Capture One tonight. How many people in this room? Let's do a quick raise of hands here. On a scale of 1 to 5. 1, you've heard of Capture One, but not a lot more. 5, you're an absolute pro at it. As a matter of fact, you're a registered pro for it. So, you guys have a good gauge about where you are with Capture One. All right, so how many 1s do I have in here? Well, here, let's do the other way, because that way I don't want to. How many 5s do we have in here? How many 4s do we have? How many 3s? Okay, raise your hand up high, be proud. Okay, how many 2s? Okay, and then a couple of 1s. Okay, great. That's fine. Don't worry about it. Here's the thing that I tell everybody about this. If you can really master this piece of software, you can get a decent paying job and make a living in any major city in the world. You have to speak the language. I will tell you that. I lived in Italy for 8 years. If you don't speak the language, you can be, it's just difficult. So that being said, we go into Capture One really, really, really deep in this class. And I know, so what we're talking about here, though, is learning a software program. And some people are drawn to that naturally. Some people are, they just suck that in. It's just, they get it, they love it, the whole 9 yards. And that's great. Other people are, it's just like, you just feel like you're banging your head against the wall. I understand all of those aspects of it. But I can promise you this, of all the possible things that you could do here at Columbia College, I'm telling you this right now, this is the one thing that can guarantee you a decent living for the rest of your life anywhere in the world. That is a powerful motivation. And when I mean decent living, I am not talking about minimum wage. That's not a decent living in my book. Decent living, if you're in Chicago, I'm talking about $60,000, $70,000, $85,000, something in that range. If you're in New York, you can add another, I don't know, $50,000, $60,000 to that. And that's just the beginning. So with that in mind, it's imperative for me to give you everything I possibly can about this. But by definition, that means it's going to be a hard slog. I'm just telling you that right now. The next 3 weeks, 2 weeks, whatever, are not going to be a lot of fun. So with that in mind, to try to keep it more animated and also to try to make it a better experience for you to learn this stuff, I need you to mimic every single thing that I am doing when I'm in Capture One. So if I throw a file away, I need you to throw a file away. If I rate something differently, you need to rate it differently. If I color tag something, if I move something, if I do any of those things, whatever, I need you to be doing that stuff. If for some reason you get lost, you're a step behind, you don't know where we are, something isn't looking the same, whatever, stop me and let's get you back on track. It is so much easier to take the 2 or 3 minutes it'll take to get you caught up during the class than it does to realize that you have not been working on any of this stuff for the last hour because your screen doesn't look anything like my screen. Does that sort of make sense? So I understand all of this. I'm telling you this right now. If you get really tired, stand up. Go, it doesn't matter. Go walk out of the class, shake around, stick your head out the window. It's freezing outside. Wake up, come back in, and get back into it, okay? It's that part. This is really, 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 really a critical part of all this. I can't make that, I can't beg you to do that any more than that. Are we good on this part? Okay. So, with that in mind, we're going to start. How many people in this, does anybody in this room actually own Capture One? Okay, that's not a bad thing. Eventually it will be something that you probably will want to own, but I'm going to tell you this right now about it. Capture One goes on sale all the time. Never ever pay full price. The full price for Capture One right now, I think, don't quote me on this, they're moving like Adobe did. They're actually moving. You can still buy it outright, but they also have a subscription model now. I think the subscription model is $10 a month, which would make it $120 a year. The purchase price for Capture One is $300 usually. It goes on sale all the time for $200. There's other situations. If you guys I think there is an educational discount for it, and I think that there is. I remember I Googled it once. And it's half off, so it takes it down to $150. Okay, so that'll get it down to $150. At that stage of the game, in my opinion, you're probably better off buying it than doing the subscription model. But you got to lay out the whole $150, all at once. Whereas the subscription model, you spread that pain out over a year. In terms of how often I upgrade Capture One, and this is just something to know about Capture One, is right now they're on version 12. They've just released version 12. Most people, myself included, stay at least 1, if not 2 versions behind. The problem in upgrading, you guys should all know this by now, if you are on the bleeding cutting edge of upgrading software, you're really a beta tester. All the shit that happens is going to happen to you. The stuff that, when they got up to when they launched version 12, they had finished with version 11. They weren't going to make any more improvements with version 11. Version 11 had gotten to be as good as it could possibly be. The reason they actually do an upgrade past that is they do major things. The biggest thing that Capture One does when it makes a version jump is they change the color engine, the engine that actually takes your sensor data and demosaics it and brings it into full color. That's what it is. So that's usually what's going on. There are other software improvements that they can make. Usually most of the software improvement stuff tend to be incremental. They're smaller, and so you will get in between version numbers. So you'll get, for instance, version 11, and then you'll get 11.1 and 11.2 and 11.3 and 11.4, and I think they got it up to 11.6, but don't quote me on that. The little jumps are free. The big jumps, going from 11 to 12, going from 10 to 12, going from 10 to 11, those are the ones that you actually have to then pay the upgrade price on if you already own it. The upgrade price for any version of Capture One to any other version is $99. So just so you have some idea sort of where you're at, where the money of this part is at, that kind of thing. They do have a 30-day trial. So if you're really interested, I think it's 30 days. It may be a little bit longer. Don't quote me on that one either. I know it's at least 30 days. You can actually download the software, and for the next 30 days, you can actually work with the full version of it for free. So are there any questions about this part of it all? When you actually do the download and actually go to open it, I'm going to do this really quickly to just so that you guys can see what it actually looks like. I've downloaded the installer from Capture One. I'm going ahead to say that. Yeah, no, this isn't going to do it because I've already got this in there. What happens is that when you go to the Capture One website, you download the software. When you go to launch it, you will get a series of options. And the first option that sits up at the top is whether you want to do the Pro version of it or not. So Capture One Pro. The Pro version is what you ultimately want to work with. The thing about the Pro version is it supports all the cameras. It supports medium format. It supports all of Phase's medium format. It supports the leaf backs that are in the studio, which are also owned by Phase. It supports Canons. It supports Nikons. And now they've actually rolled Sony's support into it. So it now, version 11 does support Sony's. I don't know about version 10, but I know 11 does for sure, and 12 obviously does as well. Fuji cameras have now been making a really big push. There is Fuji support. But what they've also done is they've also built a dedicated version of Capture One just for Fuji cameras. So the dedicated one is also an option when you get to that original login screen, that if you were working with a Fuji camera, it may be more extensive. I've never shot with a Fuji camera, so not a Fuji digital camera, so I can't really attest to that. So, but at any rate, when you get to the opening screen, you'll see at the very top, Pro. That's the one you want to pick. Underneath Pro, you will actually see a version where you can actually do the trial part of it. So they call it demo or trial or something. You get a 30-day trial period. That one is an option. Then in the next option down, again, I don't know about this in the exact order. There'll be an option for Sony. There'll be an option for Fuji. And then finally, there's one that's called DB. And the Capture One DB is actually free software. The problem with it is, or not the problem with it, the reason it exists is that Phase makes all the medium format digital backs you're likely to run into are all made by Phase today. Well, not all. Hasselblad makes some, and there are other players in the market, but the major Phase One is the major one, and Capture One is the software that you need to run those digital backs. So they figured that since you spent $35,000 on a digital back, they can give you $200 worth of software for free. Isn't that generous of them? So at any rate, the DB version is a fully functioning version, but it will only read and write medium format digital files. It will not read your Canon files. It will not read your Nikon files. It will not read your Sony files. It won't be able to process any of them. It won't do. That's what the Pro version is for. Are there any questions about this part? Okay, there is some overhead that you need to know, that you need to have the computer to actually run these things. And this is what that would actually be. Hang on 1 second, guys. Okay, if you're on Windows systems, this is Windows right here. Is there anybody in this room doing Windows? Okay. In a Macintosh world, this is what you need. You don't need to worry about the CPU with 2 cores. If you have a Macintosh that's anything, since 2008, you've got 2 cores. 8 gigabytes of RAM, this is actually a really important one. There's a lot of people who have laptops that have 4 gigabytes of RAM. With a 4 gigabyte setup, you might be able to get Capture One open, but you'll never be able to do any work in it. So to find out how much RAM you actually do have, you come up to your Apple menu, you come down to About This Mac, and in the screen that opens up, it'll tell you right down here under Memory, it'll tell you how much you've got. In my case, this computer right here, I've got 16 gigabytes of memory, so I'm okay, but that's something you should definitely check before you try to run it. 10 gigabytes of free hard disk space. We've talked about this, I think, in this class before. I'm going to go into my Finder. Again, this is the kind of stuff I want you guys to do with me right now, please. I'm going to go into my Finder. I can actually see my hard drives, but that's because I've set something up so that they show up. In most cases, the default settings for Macintosh, these things are invisible. To actually be able to see your hard drive to actually do what we need to do next, come up to the Finder, come down to Preferences, And in the window that actually opens up over in General, the General tab up here, you want to put a check mark into hard disks. For me, I actually put check marks in all of these because what these will do then is if you plug in a CD or you plug in a thumb drive or you plug in any one of those, it will actually show up here. Servers also will show up here as well. So it's just personally, I think it's a better thing to be able to see those guys. Once you get that open, in most people's cases, they have never bothered to rename their startup hard drive. Mine's actually, I've renamed mine. For most of you guys, it'll just be called Macintosh hard drive or Macintosh HD. Mine's called boot, MPB 13. Boot actually stands for, boot is the phrase that computers use, the computer language uses to indicate it is the startup drive. It's booting up the drive. So that's why mine is called that. If you click on the hard drive icon just to select it and hit Command I, it will open up a screen for you that'll actually tell you certain things about your startup hard drive. And what you really care about is the capacity, which I'm reading right here, and what's available. And what the rule of thumb in Macintosh world is that you need a minimum of 10% hard drive of available hard drive space. So you can see right here, I've actually got, and these numbers, don't get too flipped out about the numbers being, the capacity here is 974.99 gigabytes. It's a terabyte hard drive. So the truth of it is, I need a tenth of that available to me. That's 100 gigabytes. That's all you really need to know. If you've got a 250 gigabyte hard drive in there, you need 25 gigabytes of it free and open. If you've got, I can't imagine anybody in this room has a 100 gigabyte hard drive, but you might. Anyway, is this, yes?
When we check the hard disk box, it won't.
Oh, maybe it's because, so that's on these things are locked down. So it won't be on the case of something that isn't locked down that you actually have access to. Are we good on that? Sorry about that, guys. At any rate, you might be able to get to it still. If you just do Command N, it will open up a brand new window for you. And in your favorites on the scroll down over here, do you see under devices, do you have Macintosh HD? No. Let me see really quick what you got. Click on the SSD. They're going to not let you see it. So, but anyway, does that make sense for the rest of you guys? This 10% minimum is critical. I had a student in my class last year. She had a terabyte hard drive in her laptop, and she had 5 gigabytes of available space in it, and she couldn't do anything. She couldn't start up. She couldn't shut down. She couldn't quit. She could do nothing. We actually had to boot her entire computer as an external hard drive to get shit off of it so that she could even start up with it. There's a whole series of reasons for that, not any of which we need to get into deeply. I'm just saying that 10% is a minimum. If you have that 10% minimum free disk space, then you will meet the 10 gigabytes of free hard disk space criteria that they're actually asking for here. It's interesting that this software as well, it's saying that you need a color calibrated monitor. It's never going to know whether your monitor is calibrated or not, but it can't show you decent color if you don't have a color calibrated monitor. So they simply throw it in there because they expect everybody to be working in that. And then you can see this is the requirements that are for Capture One 11. If you're not upgraded yet to 10.6, 10.12 or 10.13 to find out what version of system software you're in. Again, up to the Apple menu, down to About This Mac, and it will tell you right here under Mac OS what version you're using. So if you are going to run version 11 of Capture One, you need to be at least in a 10.12. I mean a 10.11. In my case, my computer, I'm on 10.12. On these computers right here, they've actually upgraded, I think, to 10.13. Can you guys check and just tell me? 10.13? Yeah. In my opinion, and again, this is just my opinion, but I'm going to throw this out to you because, again, anybody in this room has any ambition about being a digital tech, having the most current system software is, again, you are beta testing for Apple. you are asking for a world of hurt. The latest software breaks more shit than it fixes. It's always a nightmare. Do not, I cannot beg you enough, do not upgrade. The Digital Lab Healer, I've got to be honest with you, and comes with the greatest amount of charity that I can stomach, are fucking idiots. Because they've got to have the latest, greatest all the time. All the shit that has been happening in this digital lab over the last 5 weeks is because they fucking upgraded for no reason other than it's the latest software. Idiocy. It broke so much shit. Anybody having problems in the computers in the studio? Oh, thanks to these people, they upgraded those too. Don't do that to yourself. So for me, my rule of thumb is I'm always at least one full version of software behind. So my system software, 10.13 is the current one right now. I'm at 10.12. Version 12 of Capture One is the current one right now. I'm on 11. And I just keep it that way. I won't move to 12 until they come out with Capture One 13. So, and I don't have problems. The worst thing in the world that can happen to you is that you do an upgrade the night before you've got a big job, go out, and nothing works. That's yeah, that happened to anybody ever? Yeah. All right. You can close that part up. They have other recommendations right here. Capture One can be an extremely intensive, resource-intensive program, and if you start getting into really, really, really heavy color work in here, more RAM is clearly better, and a faster CPU is clearly better. And again, you can see right here, they're saying leave plenty of hard disk space. They're recommending 100 gigabyte minimum. A lot of people have been moving to SSDs. They're solid state hard drives because they're extremely fast. And then graphics cards, because again, most software, certainly Adobe, the Adobe Suite, and this as well, are leveraging the processors that are on graphics card boards to make the software run faster. Okay. The current purchase of, so now this is an interesting one, and I don't really know how to tell you about this one, but again, I'm going deep here. Right now, a single license for Capture One will allow you to activate it on 3 different machines. Now, if you need to activate it on a 4th machine, you actually, well, here, I'll show you really quickly, and then we're going to get into Capture One in a second. So has everybody gotten, were you able to copy all those files off the server? Is it finished? Okay, good. If I am actually in Capture One 11 right now, so for those of you who are on your laptops, you're going to have to go to one of these machines unless you've got a trial version of Capture One going, because all the work we're going to do from this point on is going to be in Capture One, and if you don't have it, you can't do the work. But to get back to the whole activation thing, if you come up to the Capture One window right now, so just go ahead, you should have, they do have 11 on these computers here, don't they? Is there an 11 on there? Just 9? Shoot me in the head. No, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. 9 will work. 9 will work. 9 will work. For everything that we're going to do in this class, the 9 will be fine. Jesus. At any rate, so here, I'm going to go back to 9 then. So on my computer, I actually keep previous versions of a lot of software as well. I even have a version of Photoshop CS6. So this was released 10 years ago. But at any rate, all right, Capture One 9. Okie dokie. So when you guys launch Capture One 9, what happens? Anything? It asks you how you want to continue. Just hold off and let me get to this same place. So when it says, how do you want to continue, what are your options? You know Capture One. Go for it. Okay, so to get back, yes? Restart your whole computer. Yes. Continue a session. We're going to talk about all of this in a second. Anything else? Okay. So if, again, just this whole activation part, if you come up here to the Capture One part, you can come down to license. I think this is where they do it. There, it may be somewhere else. Actually, yeah, it's right here. So if you use your license to actually activate 3 machines, the license has nothing to do with you as a person. It has to do with the computer itself. So what your computer, all computers have a unique ID number for them, and that just gets sent up to a database that's at Capture One. And as long as the serial number of your Capture One matches your computer number, the software runs, and you don't have any problem about it. You need to be connected to the internet the first time you activate your software because it needs to make that connection with with Phase One. However, once that connection is made, unlike Adobe software, you don't ever have to be online again. You don't ever have to connect to Phase again. Once the license is kicked in and your software is running, you never have to change that part. However, if let's say you had more than 3 computers that you wanted to license this stuff on, what you do is you can actually deactivate one of your 3, and you do it via this window right here. You would click on your computer number 1, and you would click on deactivate, and what that'll do is that opens up a slot for your license number to actually activate a different computer. So you would deactivate number 1, and you would activate number 4. Does that sort of make sense what's going on here? So it's a way to do to actually have this on more than 3 computers. However, and again, I've never known anybody to really do this, but it is conceivable that if there were 3 people in this class that only had 1 computer, you 3 people could get together and you could buy 1 license to Capture One, and you could all have the license to Capture One, and you would have a working version of it. There's nothing illegal or nothing that would stop you to do that, because again, Capture One is licensing the computers, not you. Make sense? So, believe me, I'm not a broker here. I don't want to get into that mess. But if that's something, you should be aware that that's an option for you. I'm going to close this guy up. So again, you can activate 3 machines, can be active the entire time. The only time you need to be connected to the internet is when you first register the very, very first time. And then again, it will actually run that database check for you, and you will be good to go. Okay, how many people in here have got all the latest, greatest USB-C connections on their cute little brand new laptops, right? That's not going to be an issue for running Capture One at all, but it can be a serious issue for running all the cameras that can be run by this. So, for instance, most phase cameras and the leaf cameras that we have in the studio, the phase cameras that are in the studio have 2 different types of connections. They have either FireWire or USB 3. So you can use just a regular USB 3 adapter, just a little baby dongle that you've got to go from the regular USB 3 cord to your USB-C on your little laptop. And you should be fine to go. There shouldn't be any problem with that. However, if you get into any of the older digital backs, the older phase backs, there's a whole P series of backs. There's a 101, an early 101 series of them, whatever. All of those expect FireWire. And the problem is that there are some dongles, like I have actually got a dongle right here that will take me. This will take me from a Thunderbolt connection, not a USB-C, but a Thunderbolt connection to FireWire. I can use this to operate a camera. The problem, though, that you need to know about this, just again, I'm trying to plant these seeds in your all's minds, because these are the kind of things that can come up that you need to be able to troubleshoot. The problem with this is that FireWire, in its original version, just this guy, not only allowed data to transfer over it very quickly, it allowed an enormously high voltage power supply to run across this as well. And what everybody did was that everybody used the power that was in here. So this thing was data connection, but it was also your energy source. So this ran your cameras, this runs your digital backs. It provided all the power to them. if you put this dongle in like this, that kills the power. The power does no, data will go across this, but you don't get power anymore, so your digital back will not turn on. So the solution to that is that all digital backs have batteries in them, and you need to plug the batteries in. So the batteries have to supply the power to the digital back, and then this will satisfy the data connection. If you are hell-bent and determined on doing, because a lot of people don't like working with digital backs that have batteries in them, there is a solution to this to actually allow you to work with pretty much any camera, any computer system that's out today and still feed the energy to these FireWire guys. To do that, I need everybody to jump online really quickly. And you want to go to MacSales, MacSales. And when you get to MacSales, you want to search for Hub. And when you get to Hub, the search results for Hub, I'm going to scroll down and show you the one that you are actually looking for. It's actually made by MacSales, so, or by OSW. That's what they're called. So it's I'm sorry, this OWC. If you look under brand, just to get us to a much smaller list, click on OWC. And these are the ones that you actually need to think about. This top one right here would be, it's the most current version that they've got. If you just go in to take a quick look at this, it'll show you what is actually on this guy. And so what it has is, it has one USB-C connection, which will allow all the people with brand new laptops to connect to it. It's got one USA Generation 3, which will handle all the cameras that are in the studio. It's got Thunderbolt on the back and Ethernet. However, this particular hub will not run FireWire, so it would be a great one to run latest greatest stuff, but not the FireWire solution one. So that's their version 3 of this Thunderbolt dock. If you have to run the FireWire one, you want to look for their Thunderbolt version 2. Has anybody found it yet? Alrighty then. They don't make it anymore. So, if it turns out that that's something you have to do, send me an email. I'll find a solution for you somehow. Okay. There are people that can circumvent this whole thing if they are working with a tower that allows you to actually add cards. You can add FireWire cards to this, to a computer that will allow a cable to go directly into it. If you're going to go down that route, you need to go to Phase's site, and there is a database that they will show you which FireWire cards are compatible with their digital backs and which ones are not. So outside of this class, outside of the leaf backs that you guys have used in the studio, has anybody used any other kind of medium format digital backs? What'd you use? Hasselblad. Got it. Anybody else? Anything else? Okay. Alrighty. So that gets us through that, gets us through that, gets us through that. Okay. So with everybody hopefully has some version of Capture One open, would that be fair to say? Could you get 9 open? And do you have anything that looks like, well, here, I'm going to do, what does your screen look like? Just blank? Okay. So let's do this. I've got to rebuild a session for you guys. Hang on one second. I'm going to give you guys something really quick because the session you've got will not work. What's today's date? 25th.
Hey, Bruce, I don't know if it's just me, but Capture One will not open on the computers that I keep switching to. It keeps like saying the app is crashing unexpectedly.
So, and how many of you tried it on?
But it's this one and this one. And this computer.
And that computer as well?
So I'm about to just try to do that.
Try another computer really quick. I need to get numbers though, really fast.
This one is 12.
12. Hang on one sec. So it won't work on 12. Kate, what's your number? Wait, 12, 14. What else?
19.
19.
It'll open and then it'll just like pop up with that box like saying send report, and if you send the report, then it closes the app.
Right.
And it just keeps doing that.
Okay. Hey, can you guys do me a favor? Jen, can you jump over? Or well, you guys can't wait. Never mind, because you have to log in under your name. Say what? I don't know if you can do two machines. We'll try it. I'm just trying to see. I'm just trying to get these guys on something that'll work and also find out. So thanks, guys. Yeah, if it's on already, then just see if it'll fire up. What number? Oh, no, if it opens like that, you're good to go. Yeah, so you know Capture One, and then say start with session. Okay, so Michaela, if you want these guys over here, yeah, and then just you can hit the.
Not working either.
Yeah, but these three over here are.
Yeah, I'm gonna move over there. I'm
Okay.
still gonna know this one is
Oh, and what number is it?
18.
18. Okay, thanks. Thanks, guys. Great, thanks. All right, guys, so inside that folder I asked you to copy, there was a file called Capture One Demo Session. You can throw that out because it won't work for you. And instead, I'm going to give you another one. And the one I just gave you, the one that I just put up there is called 201902225_C1 Pro Demo. If you could actually copy that to your hard drive. And then once you get that, Well, I'm going to wait till you guys get that copied.
It was the demo session we were deleting, right?
Yes. All right, are we good? Okay, so inside, if you open up that folder, the one, the 2019022 underscore C1 Pro demo, there is a file that's at the very top, and it's got this really long name with this incredibly long extension on it. It's named after the session itself, and then it's got that .cosessi. Anyway, basically this is the session preference file. If you double click on this guy, it should bring you into Capture One, and it should load a file for you. You should see that file sitting right up here. It should look like just like this. Did that work for everyone? Say what? Are you sure you got session Capture One 9? Did it work for everyone else? Say what? What other computers over here were actually working? Try this computer right here. Corey, try this guy and see if it works on that one. No, Jimmy, let me see this one. I'll see one. So you're on down here now. That's because this thing is trying to open up right now. So click on the browse. And then you need to find this thing. You know what it is. Next one up. Yep. No, just click it. We need to go to thinking again. I need to really read that. It's not that. It's the one under it.
This one says session cannot be opened.
Say what?
Session cannot be opened.
They just don't like you, Corey. You know? So we need to put this one. Oh, it may be that they copy this over to this. All right, has everybody else got this open, I hope? Okay, first things first, I need to make sure that everybody's got something that looks sort of like mine. When you look up at the very top up here, well, let's do this first. Do me a favor. We'll come back to this in just a second. I need everybody to go up to the window menu, to come down to workspace, and then come down to default. So look up at my screen to see where I'm at right now. Window, down to workspace, down to default, and let go. And this should get everybody's computer the way that not the way that Photoshop, the way that Capture One actually ships. Not that we are going to keep it this way, but this way at least all of our screens will actually look the same. So does everybody have something that looks something like mine, somewhat? Okay, if we take a look at the very top row right here, so take a look at my screen to see where I'm at. These are a series of tool tabs. They're not tools in of themselves. They are tool tabs. They're full collections of tools. So for instance, it's sort of hard to see on the very first one, but if you come over to the next one, the one that looks like the little camera guy, and you click on it, you can see that you have got a series of things in here that have a direct connection to your camera and your camera control and the way cameras actually work. So for instance, you've got an exposure evaluation. This is actually a tool. So this thing up here is called a tool tab. The thing that it holds are actually tools. So exposure evaluation is a tool. Next capture naming is a tool. Camera settings are tools. These are all tools. The guys up here are tool tabs. Does that make sense, the difference in this? So again, these tabs that run across the top are collections of tools that phase feels like you probably, depending on what your task is, that you would want to have collected in a space. All of this is actually adjustable and movable and changeable, and we're going to talk about all of that and get into all of that in just a second. So I need everybody to go back to the one that's on the far left-hand side, the one that looks like a little folder. This is actually called the library module. This is where we're at right now. This is where you always begin in Capture One. This is where you will actually do, this is where you build your sessions, this is where you'll actually do things, this is where you do all of your organization, this is where you find things, this is where you assign folders to do specific things, whatever. That's basically what's going on in here. And this is where we're going to start. As we go along, we will work our way over. Just so that you know, the next one over is the capture folder that they call for camera. The next one over has to do with color. The next one over is exposure. The next one over is lenses, then composition and cropping, details, sharpening, zooming, that kind of stuff. So anyway, that's what all of these guys are here. We're not going to keep this guy looking the way this looks right now. To get some images, hopefully, God, if this doesn't work, I'm going to just like, I'm taking you all out to a bar, and we're just going to call it a day. Click on the thing under Sessions folder. Any of these things, if they are collapsed, there are little arrows next to them to open them up. I need the Sessions folders visible to you. You should see one that says Capture, Selects, Output, and Trash. If you click on the Capture folder, it should populate the bottom underneath your screen with a series of thumbnails that actually go across. Jesus, how out of focus could this... Anyway, does everybody have images? Oh my God, this is a good thing. Okay, if you just click on the first one, it is a horizontal image, and in many ways, this would be an ideal setup for people who actually shoot horizontally. Now, I'm not one of those people, so it just depends on the style of how you shoot, whether you want to actually keep the screen laid out in this configuration or not. Some of you guys shoot both. You do horizontal and vertical both. In that case, whatever, I would just suggest that you pick the one that you spend the majority of your time shooting in. But for us, you can see if you come over and you click on the third image over, the first one that's of Elizabeth, you can see that because this is a vertical shot, it ends up being extremely small, and there's an enormous amount of screen real estate here that we're not really taking advantage of. So you can change how the layout of this whole thing works. To change the... Yes?
I'm sorry, my pictures are popping up, and I tried to look at different folders. They have just like triangles saying.
This is not the easiest room to navigate quickly. You know what I mean? Sure do. It looks like the only thing that got copied to your desk was that one file. That's not what you want. So go back to here. And navigate to our past projects is open, so just double click on this class projects. Go to blue heart and drag that entire folder to your desktop. No, just make sure you're good. And then double click on that file. No, go back on the very top. And then click the capture folder. Hey, all right, we're good. Yeah, there's a enabling our capture. I'll send an email. Never mind. It's okay. It's a mess, but it's okay. I'll just send it to Gia because I think it's a software issue. I'll copy you if you'd like. Yeah, please. Okay, I'll do that. All right. Thanks again. Okay. So to fix this situation, and it's the thing that most people, again, a lot of people, if you're shooting vertically, you would never want it to actually be like this. You can also control the width of your screen just a little bit more if you actually hover on the space between this tool tab pane right here and the viewer. So just to give you guys a little bit of definition right here, these are the tool tab panes right here. If you hover your mouse right over the line that divides the two, you'll see you get a double-headed arrow, and you can actually get this to drag out to be just a little bit wider. There's a limit to it. It'll only go so far. And anyway, that's what this is. The thing that's down here that's got the thumbnails, by definition, they call that the browser. And then this thing that's actually got the big image right here, they call that the viewer. So that's what these three things are. To change this to really be a better setup for people who are actually shooting vertical, you actually come up to the View menu, and you come down to Place Browser on the right. So again, look up at my screen to see where I'm at. There are a gazillion keyboard shortcuts for everything here in Capture One. If you're a really keyboard person, you've hit the mother lode. You can actually customize all the keyboard shortcuts. We'll look at those in just a second. But at any rate, for me, I just grab Place Browser on the right. And if you do that and let go, you'll see that your viewer image now gets considerably larger, and you actually have a larger set of thumbnails that are also sitting over here as well. Did that work for everybody? Okay, there is now a dividing line between, again, the pane lines that are the tool tab pane that exists here, the viewer that exists here, and then the thumbnails or the browser that's actually over here. If you hover over the line that's between the browser and the viewer, you will see you get that double-headed arrow again. If you come up, let me see something really quick on mine. Yeah, just to make sure. Okay, if you click and drag that and you start to bring it to the left, you will see that your thumbnails start to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and then all of a sudden they start to populate into more columns. So instead of just a single column, you now get multiple columns here. And you can see as we're pushing over, I'm not making my viewer image any smaller, because what's defining the viewer image is the height of this screen. So as I push over, it's not getting any smaller. I've got 2 columns of thumbnails right now. If you continue to push over, I've got 3 now, and my viewer still hasn't gotten any smaller. You can continue to push over, and at a certain stage of the game, you will see that your viewer does start to get smaller as you are getting more and more columns of thumbnails. And you know, guys, for the most part, for me anyway, this becomes an issue of how people prefer to look at their stuff, especially while they're shooting, because that's a big part of what this is about when you're actually working tethered. Do you want to see, how many thumbnails do you want to see? Do you want to be able to go back and forth, whatever? You can actually drag your cursor back the other way. At a certain stage of the game, you hit sort of this sweet spot. If you really like a lot of thumbnails, a bunch of thumbnails that sit here, like I've got 3 columns of them right now, I've gotten my viewer back to being as big as it can possibly be, and that will never change. So there's some people who would like to work like this. Personally, for me, I hate this view. I don't like having a whole lot of thumbnails on my screen. It makes me think of a really bad scrapbook, but I just want you guys to know that that's basically what's going on here. Couple of other things to look at. If you look at the very top of the browser screen right here, you will actually see there's a thing that looks like an eyeball. That's what it's supposed to look like. If you click on that drop-down eyeball, you will actually see there's 3 icons that are underneath this. By default, the one that's picked is the one on the far left-hand side. That's the one that's saying you want as many icons as you can possibly get. If you click on the next one over, though, you change what you see in the browser, and what you end up with in the browser is a series of really small thumbnails, but you get what some people would consider to be critical metadata. So you get things, you not only get the name of the file, but you get its ISO, you get the aperture that things were shot at. If you actually click on the scroll bar that's at the bottom and go over, you will see that there's even more metadata in there. You have shutter speeds, focal length of lenses, the date that the image was shot. If we had added keywords or anything else like that, those would all be showing up in here as well. So some people like to have that part of it. Personally, me, I don't like that part of it, but anyway. I don't really care about that. However, there's a compromise that you can actually get into this that some people actually do like, that might work a little bit better for if you really needed to see metadata at the same time as you needed to see your big image. And that is to go back to the original default view. To do that, go up to the View menu. Again, I need everybody to do this with me. And now you'll notice that Place Browser doesn't say on the right anymore. It says Place Browser below. When you do that, you actually then get a much wider thing for the metadata list that exists right here. You can see I've got a smaller, again, I shrunk my view menu part, whatever, but I got all of the metadata that actually is sitting across. Again, none of these images are rated yet. So that's basically what's going on in here. However, again, I'm not a big fan of this sort of stuff. I don't work like this, so that's just me. However, there are people who only want to work like this, and you can take this a step further. You can actually hide the entire viewer screen. To do that, you come up to the View menu and you come down to Hide Viewer. And the viewer goes away and you end up getting this full-blown screen that has just got all the metadata. It's got little bitty thumbnails that you need. And some people, this is how they like to actually sort through stuff. So just so that you, again, know it's just another way that you can actually see all of your work, right? If you go back, I want to go back. I'm going to turn the viewer back on because I'm going to step us back through. So come back down to Show Viewer again. So up to the View menu, down to Show Viewer. It'll come back again. We are going to put the browser to the right again like we did before. So again, up to the View menu, down to Place Browser on the right-hand side. But now, actually, instead of looking at this list, what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to go back to the original view. I'm going to click on the drop-down menu underneath the eyeball, and I'm going to go back to the icons. It puts thumbnails out on here for me, which is what I want. But now you can hide the viewer again. So up to the View menu, down to Hide Viewer. This is a contact sheet. So this would be a way to actually look at your image and have a gigantic contact sheet. There is a slider over here on the top right-hand side of the browser window right now, because it's all we're looking at, that allows you to control the size of your thumbnail. So if you click on this and actually drag it up, you can control the thumbnail size. If you click on the little bitty person that's all the way on one side, it drops it down to 100% view. If you click on the little person again, they get smaller. The little person again, they get even smaller still. The big person will bump you up in increments. Again, it goes from 25 to 50 to 100% to 200%, all the way up to 400%. So some people prefer to look at their images like this. It's a way to look at a big group of thumbnails. Again, this is not particularly the way that I like to work, but I just need you guys to know that these options are available to you, not only for how you work, but also to help somebody out to decide how they want to actually view their work as well. We're going to show the viewer again, so up to the View menu, down to Show Viewer. The viewer will actually come back on. you'll see that we've actually got one really big thumbnail that's actually sitting over here. We've got one column of thumbnails that are over here. There's one last thing on this little drop-down eyeball that I want to show you. Again, on the drop-down eyeball, the very first one is contact sheet, so it's as many thumbnails as you can have. The next one over is our list. It's got all the metadata. The last one over, though, if you click on this guy, what this guy does is it restricts this so that you only have one single column of thumbnails. No matter how big or small you make them, it never will actually change. So you can see if you hover on that area that's between the two panes, and you get the double-headed arrow, even as you get and make your viewer smaller and smaller and smaller, you never, ever, ever will change the size or the number of columns of thumbnails that you actually have. So the way most people will set this up is they will drag this back to the point where they keep the biggest of the thumbnails that they can get with a single column, which is mine right there, and then they've got the biggest screen as well. So it gives you a really big thumbnail, but it also gives you a really big viewer right here. Personally, this is how I like to work. This is how I set my screen up. Are there questions about this? There's a lot of advantages to this, and I want to show you one of them because this is a pitfall a lot of people run into. If we go back to the regular view where you have a whole lot of thumbnails, and we actually, again, at the very top right-hand side, you'll see you can click on that person up there and get our scaling to drop back and take us back down to a smaller size so that you have multiple thumbnails here. So I've got multiple thumbnails going. I'm going to click on the very first image because it actually selects it. So if you want to go through your browser using the arrow keys, which is how most people will actually navigate, there is a problem. There's a trick to this, and you need to know this trick. So you should be writing all of this down or listening to the video again. If you look at your arrow keys, you've got a right, left, up, and down. If you hit your down arrow key, you will see in a two-column split for the browser like this that what just happened is I went from my first image, I skipped the second image, and I go to the third because I'm using the down arrow. The down arrow respects this column, but the problem with that is that if you're unaware that that's actually going on, using the up and down arrow keys will only show you half of your images. You'll miss all the ones in between. Instead, when you want to navigate, regardless of how you are looking at this, you always want to use your right and left arrows. If you use the right arrow key, again, I've selected my very top image. If you use the right arrow key, you go to frame number 2, then you go to frame number 3, to frame number 4, frame number 5. If you use the left arrow key, you go back through at the opposite direction. So it's just the way. Don't get into the habit of using the up and down arrow keys because depending on how somebody sets this up, you can actually miss half of your images. So for me, the way I like to have mine set up is, again, I use that drop-down arrow. I go to the icon all the way on the right-hand side to actually give me this view. I make sure that my image is as big as it can be, but no bigger, but I also want to make sure that my viewer is as big as it can be. So, and in this case, because we've got both horizontal and vertical, I'm hitting a compromise. So then again, at this stage of the game now, right arrow will actually step me down through, left arrow will take me back up through. Are we good on this? If you click on an image, you'll actually see that there is a white line that goes around it. That shows you what image has actually been selected in your browser. So again, if you come down to the next one and click on it, that little white line will go around it. If you look at the very top of your viewer screen right here, you will see there are 3 icons that sit up here. These also control what you can and can't see. So right now, if you have the one that's all the way to the left of this that shows the 4 little icons, they call this the multi-view. With that selected, you can actually, again, I'm going to select this very top image. If you hold down your command key, you can select a second image, and both of those images will pop up into your viewer. However, if you look at your browser, you'll also notice there's a heavy heavy white line around one of them, and there is a thin white line around the other one. What that's telling you is that if we were to do some change right now, if we were to do an exposure slider or a color correction or whatever, well, here, we'll do a color correction. Actually, just click on a skin tone, and you can see it changes the color of this image, but not the other one. The other one is just being shown to you. If you hit Command Z, which works in Capture One, it will undo that. If you click then down on the image below it, you will see that the heavy white line now is going around the studio shot, not around the figure on here. Again, the thin white line's on that. Now, when again you also were to do a color correction, even if you try to click on this one at the top, it actually changes you back to that and color balances. But in our case, if you stay down here and say click on the yellow, you can see that it actually, I mean the orange sandbag, it actually makes your image really blue because it's trying to do color balance. Command Z to undo that. However, there are ways to actually, and you can see now you've got 2 frames that are selected. To get rid of either one so that nothing is selected, you need to select in this area that is actually outside the image. So you can see right here, I'm actually clicking in this area that's right above the studio scene. I'm not clicking on the image, I'm not clicking on this image, I'm clicking on the area that's right in between. If you click on that, it gets rid of all of your selection. If you then come over here to this screen and you click on the next view over, this single square, if you click on it and then again click on a single image, everything appears to be working like it always did. However, now if you hold down the Command key and click on the image underneath, you do not get the second view. It doesn't show it. It is selected, but it isn't showing because you have said, I only want one image visible at a time by clicking on this little guy right here. Again, I'm going to click on the area between, just not in the live image area, but part of the border between them to get rid of all selection. And then we're going to pick the, I'm going to go ahead and click on a single image again, but then I'm going to click on the next one over, the last of the icons that are over in the top. If you click on that, this is what they call the proof margin. You'll notice that the first of the icons doesn't go away. It will only show you a single image. But what it does is it actually gives you this border around it that assures you are seeing 100% of the image. Because with this thing turned off, there could be part of your image could be underneath this, part of your image could be underneath this. You may not be seeing your entire image. When you click on this, it'll actually gives you borders around here to assure you that you are. Now again, in my experience, nobody uses this stuff. Everybody uses the multi-mode that's actually sitting at the beginning, which is how I would suggest you guys to actually do this. Are there questions about this? So, how many people, let's all just stand up really quick because we can. It's almost 8 o'clock anyway. So, how many people right now are going, you have got to fucking be kidding me. We haven't even gone into the program yet. All I'm looking is these little icons above those browser parts. This is insanity. I did not sign up for this. Just keep that $100,000 job in Paris in the back of your mind. I know, it's a motivator, right? Okay, guys, I've got, let's call it, well, we'll call it 8:02. The same thing has happened. The digital lab is closed now, so we've got to, the gate over there, I think, is closed. So you need to go, if you're going to go out, you need to go out this way. We'll keep the door open so that you can get back in. If you guys could get back by 20 after, let's call it quarter after, please. We got a lot to get through today.